You are my linen garment I put on. Lord, you are my linen garment I put on, while I minister to you in the inner courts. They shall not gird themselves with anything that causes sweat. They shall not gird themselves with anything that causes sweat. Lord, you are my linen garment I put on. Lord, you are my linen garment I put on, while I minister to you in the inner courts. Oh, your garments smell of earth and aloe, of acacia. Oh, your garments smell of myrrh and aloe, of acacia, as I minister to you in the inner court.
Well, hello, you Linenites. How are you this day? I wanted to take a moment to ponder a question that I've been wondering lately, which is, where are the guardians? Do you know what I mean by that? Some of you may not actually know what becoming a Linenite and this series is all about, or why we've been on a quest to try to be... Hey, sorry about that. Sometimes I lose signal because, satellites, right? They just can't see you when you go down hills, I guess. Shocker. Anyways, I'm wanting to help you guys to better understand and formulate in your minds maybe what it is that becoming a Linenite is about. Because I know people think a lot of it is about fabric. And it's, yes, that's a part of it. But really what it's, the fundamental basis of it is about what is it that we regard in our life. There are things that we regard and there's things we disregard. And if you haven't noticed, linen is one of those things that basically everyone has disregarded. Granted, I know there's some of you out there that are diehards, that have been Linenites forever since before I was conceived, which is great for you. And I'm so thankful that you cherish something wonderful like linen. But we find most of our linen at the Goodwill. It's a tremendous place. Well, or at thrift stores in general. But they're literally dumping grounds for this stuff, right? I'm going to be talking, fair warning, I'm going to be talking a lot of military battles and weaponry and bullets and crazy stuff like that. Granted, it's insane out there. And I want people to understand just wonders of the world. But the Goodwills and the thrift stores are places where it's literally the congregation house of things people disregard, right? It's the outcasts of our homes. The Goodwill is like a treasure trove of people, what people now no longer think is valuable to them any longer. And we have found some of the finest pieces of linen. This shirt I'm wearing, which has become my work shirt, farm shirt, was no joke, $100 shirt. It was $100 shirt that had been worn one time and then dry cleaned and then dumped there. It had the tags of all of these occasions still attached to it. It was, maybe it wasn't technically worn by the person. It still had all the tags, but it also had dry cleaning tags. Maybe they buy clothes. Maybe really affluent individuals buy clothes, dry clean them, and then wear them. I don't know. But I was astonished to find some of these things there. And you know what I realized? Most of my life, I have been someone who has dug out of the wastebaskets of human existence. Out of the excess of society, I intend to build my family's livelihood and household. Literally on the waste. But you know what's amazing is that as you start to think and consider about the things that other people disregard as no longer valuable or as no longer beneficial, you suddenly find that there's some of the best treasures in the world, right? Let me show you one of them. Bam. You know what that is? Amethyst. How beautiful is that? I found this in the dirt, the actual dirt. I did a video called The Corundum Conundrum, where you can watch me basically weeping, hoping to find giant gemstones, which I did. I just ended up finding out they weren't as valuable as I thought. Like, this is a sapphire, a giant clunker. Look at that thing. That's a sapphire. Tremendous. This is an amethyst. I found this in the dirt, in a place where literally everybody had walked by and disregarded as something that didn't matter anymore. Gorgeous. I love this thing.
Well, don't worry, it rained. They turned off the sluice because the lightning's not so good for the skin. But you know what's always good for the skin? Water and electricity. There's a natural river now flowing under my hands, which is going to put a giant stone in my hand. Like that. Look at that. Look at that. Oh! No, Nick! No! Well, get it, Nate! Get it! Get it! Go get it!
See?
Oh, wow. Yeah, what's that?
Purple. Look at that.
Oh, this is fun. Good job, Nate. You're such a treasure hunter, honey. I hope you find your ruby today.
Oh, I know I will. And my big blue sapphire.
Ooh, I like
Azure blue.
it.
But you know what I used to think was basically the most valuable thing in the world? Yeah, bullets. Bullets, baby. I did. I was so in love with these. I used to have these in my pockets continually. Since the first time I ever really saw, like, this shape. Look at that. This is from a 300 Blackout cartridge, which is a tremendously intense cartridge. It's designed to be the perfect balance between stopping power, firepower, and controllability. Obviously, everybody thinks each bullet is going to be their best ever for whatever it is. This is a manslayer, right? It's not designed to hunt coyotes like the 223 or the 556. This is a great round, great cartridge, right? I used to love bullets so much, and I would carry them with me continually. Now, you know what I carry generally? Gemstones. Jewels, literal jewels, because the Father's entrusted me with actual jewels out of the earth. This came out of the earth and a machine. You know, I've made my own ammunition. I take that back. I have made my own ammunition, but it requires very special tools, and it requires complex machinery for other people to do kind of chemical sorcery to turn dirt crystals into this. It's pretty wild stuff. But the reason I was thinking about this today was because I was considering a passage from 2 Samuel. Okay, you ready for this? I did an entire series on becoming a Gibborim. That's another series that I did. If you guys haven't watched it, it would behoove you to do so. And you know what I'm trying to capture? The hearts of the young men and the young women out there. Do you know why? Because they're all over the scripture. I just keep hearing this phrase, the young men, lately. And I've wondered, what's the deal with the young men? You know, why are the young men back in their culture, they weren't outcasts. You know what I mean? Like, we divorce our children by and far in the United States of the plumed serpent, America. We disinherit our children. We shove them out the door when they're 5-ish, 6. We kick them out and tell them, go be raised by a bunch of people that hate Yahweh and hate his word. What could go wrong? Shocker. Look at our society. That's the fruit of our homes. But back then, they did different things with their children. Like, they raised them personally and oversought their training and their development. And you know how they raised them? With regard to this. They regarded this as their instruction book. Like, when I was in the United States military, I went to basic combat training when I was a junior in high school. I was 17 years old. I got emancipated in the United States military. And I was sent to a place called Fort Knox, Kentucky. Most people think of Fort Knox, Kentucky, they think of, like, maybe, if you've been properly conditioned, to think of that's where America keeps its gold. We have a bullion reserve, allegedly, of like 46 or 4,800 tons of gold there. I've never personally seen it, nor has anybody I know ever personally seen it to say whether or not we have it, or if it's more or less, you know. But at that place, giant underground bunker system, they have the home of the Armor Training Center. It is the place from World War II to more or less modernity, where they trained soldiers to become a soldier, well, trained human beings, civilians, to become soldiers. And they tried to take out of your mind the way you used to think about things like a civilian did. They made you no longer consider the world through the lenses of civilian, like free choice and stuff like that. And they made you think about things like this, and what you could do with this, and how to be a strategic tactician with the weapons of your warfare. How to be people who wore armor and moved about sneakily or very openly and blazingly. And it was at that place where they trained soldiers to become proficient users of armored vehicles. So this is everything from weapons platforms like the Bradley fighting vehicle. If you guys tune into this video on my YouTube channel, If you're watching this on YouTube, congratulations. I'll do a lot of post-production work so you can see all these wonderful things with your own eyes, and it makes a difference. But there's things like the Bradley fighting vehicle, and the M1 Abrams tank. Those two weapons platforms are genuinely some of the most astonishing tools that have ever been cranked out of a machine in history that I've personally seen. The Bradley fighting vehicle, okay, wait a second. Before I get to that, I've got to tell you about the first time I walked into an armory as a young man. I was 17 years old, and you know what? I was so bedazzled by all this stuff. I don't think there was a single episode of the History Channel, like World War II in color series. I watched every documentary, video, show I could find back then. This is pre-Netflix and before you could binge on worthlessness forever. Back when you had to just watch it when it came on. So instead of doing schoolwork, that's generally what I did, because I get schoolwork done in a couple hours and then just watch or read books on history. And I loved warfare, specifically World War II and World War I were just fascinating to me. Vietnam scared the piss out of me, genuinely. It was a nightmare, literally like the most terrifying fighting conditions I could conceive of. So I avoided that like the plague it was. But I studied World War II. And during World War II, that time in history was when the biggest tank battles that ever happened in the history of mankind took place. There was a battle called the Battle of Kursk, and it took place in the Soviet Union. And it was a battle between like 10,000 tanks. And most people are like, 10,000 tanks, whatever. I don't know anything about tanks. Okay, when I was 17 and I got to go to basic combat training, I had this dream from my youth of being able to go to the armory of a United States Army base. I dreamed of that, right? This is where like the coolest weapons of the world are stashed that I could access reasonably. They were like the craziest weapons, right? This is like the iconic scene in the movie, like The Matrix or whatever else brainwashing movie you've seen, where like they open the doors to this barred vault. Like it's a special kind of vault, but it's not the vault where they store the gold, right? This is where they store the weapons for warfare. This is a kadosh place. That's a set apart holy place. This was the holy temple to all the people that worship the gods of war. This was the place where you wanted to go if you wanted to be someone enlisted in for the ranks of combat, right? You were a young man generally, just hook, line, and sinker wanted to be all in on that. And I was so ready for it. I went in when I was like at the prime of my hunger for that. And I walked into the armory, and I'll never forget it. They have these big barred gates, okay? And a huge lock on them, right? And the armorer, that's a literal title in the army, savage. I really wanted to be an armorer. Kind of, until I saw what they did. He opens the gates, right? And it's like peeling these heavy doors open. And it's like, oh, this is in that, like, you could have people singing. And men were singing and rejoicing in like a line, a dedicated line, because we're frothing at the mouth with enthusiasm, hopped on so much adrenaline and testosterone and impossible amounts of vaccines that were poisoning our souls. It was crazy time. We were all frenzied and darn near peeing our pants with enthusiasm. And then we got to go in, and they're like, you are ready to receive your M16A2 rifle. And we're like, yes, yes. But behind the armory on the other side, this wall of M16s, which are semi-automatic, they have 3-round bursts, but they don't have full auto capacity. That's the M16A1 or maybe some of the newer M4s and stuff like that today. But back then, we just had single shot or 3-round burst capacity. And then next to that rack of M16s is this line of the M240 Bravo machine gun, which is a 7.62 millimeter cartridge, similar-ish in size to this diameter, but a bigger bullet, bigger brass casing on the back to hold more power so it can go faster and farther. A beautiful round. And that's a full automatic machine gun, right? That thing is outrageously powerful. Next to that, though, were these M16A1 machine guns that had the M203 grenade launcher, 40 millimeter grenade launcher that could launch high explosive incendiary rounds downrange, son. Crazy, raining fire and chaos on people. Then you had next to that, oh, sweet Moses of the Nile, one of my favorite rifles in the history of the world, the Ma Deuce machine gun, right? It's the M2 machine gun, stunningly powerful. It could shoot cartridges that are 1/2 inch in diameter, miles, literal miles, so far that it was like we had to read the manuals before we could touch any of this stuff for months, okay? And we would read in these manuals about the distances that these rounds could actually carry, like killing power still, that they could cause genuine harm to another human being miles away. And it's so hard to think about. If you live in a mountainous area, you can see miles all the time. I grew up in Colorado. in Arizona in the mountains, and I could see miles all the time, sometimes 100 miles, sometimes 120 miles consistently. So I was like, yeah, it's not that far. But then when you're down somewhere where it's like there's just flat lands, to shoot something miles is insane, because you don't ever really get to see more than a couple miles at any given time, generally around 3 or 4 miles. You could shoot that far all the time with the Browning M2 machine gun. It was glorious. You could shoot it single shot or 3 to 5 round bursts generally. It's not like the movies where they're like, brrr, and because it melts your barrel. Your barrel literally turns molten red and will melt apart. So you don't shoot full auto like they do in the movies, unless you have a quick change barrel, which is what the M2 does, which is great. But next to that, they also had the AT-4, which was an anti-tank rocket launcher. Oh, just let me say that again. It was an anti-tank shoulder-fired rocket launcher. It launched a rocket off of a dude's shoulder. Think about this for a second. You could launch a rocket that could destroy a tank that may cost $10 million from your shoulder. And they had those in that armory. They also had grenades in there, which are wonderful. Flashbang grenades and high explosive grenades. They weigh about a pound. It's like a pound of metal that can kill everybody within 5 meters or 3 meters. Just crazy firepower, right? And they closed that up. We got to slowly and incrementally learn the M16. And then we got to like slowly be entrusted with the next weapons platform. Then we slowly got an opportunity to like shoot the M2 machine gun. And then on one day at the range, we got to launch the AT-4 and we got to shoot rockets off our shoulders, and it melted holes in tanks. Like Swiss cheese style. The AT-4 would melt 18 inches of solid armor steel. If you guys don't work with steel, this means nothing to you. Here's a tiny piece of steel from a knife. Okay? I couldn't melt my way through this with anything I own. Now let's put 18 inches, right? 18 inches of that. And just bore a hole like Swiss cheese style through it from a shoulder. And it comes out of a cardboard tube, basically. It's outrageously spectacular firepower. And we were shooting the targets at that range that day were T-34. They were old T-34 Russian tanks. And at the Battle of Kursk, which was the largest tank battle in history, that was predominantly the weapon platform of the Soviets. The Germans had like the Panzer. It was like the weapon of all wonder for the Germans when the Panzer came on the fields, and the Tigers. And it was the craziest battle in the history of tank warfare. And basically the Soviets, they slaughtered the offensive line that came at them from the Germans. It was crazy because they'd entrenched themselves with like lines and lines and lines of defensive areas so that the Germans had to go through trenches that would swallow tanks, and they had machine gun nests and anti-tank rifles, and they had anti-tank rocket launchers, and it was just this wild time where there was houses and cities and walls and fortifications that they had to fight their way through. And then they had airplanes dive bombing from the skies, dropping bombs on tops of the turrets, which is like a weak spot in a tank. If you want to target a tank, you can drop stuff right on top of the turret or right up the exhaust pipe or right underneath it. And so there's mines and there's barbed wire and it's just a crazy thing. Tank battles are nuts, guys. It's when you're like reading the warfare manuals and trying to study how to become a tactician to fight warfare in just armored vehicles, you go to a special school for that, because you know what? Dudes that carried rifles have no comprehension for stuff like that. We just see the stuff and we think it's awe-inspiring. We were carrying all like our M16s and our M240 Bravos and stuff like that. And then we had the SAW, the squad automatic weapon, which was a 5.56, like a tiny bullet. It shoots basically pencils at people, tiny pencil darts at people, but really fast, like a hornet's nest, just hitting all at once. We were carrying all this stuff in formation, and I'll never forget the first time I saw a tank, like an M1 Abrams tank. This is like $10 million driving down the road. And we felt it like thunder rolling down the street. Like, it's no joke. It shakes you. It shakes your feet. Your feet shake. The earth itself shakes when one of these comes by. And this thing comes rolling up, and we're just like, the drill sergeants are like, stay in formation, keep your distances, right? Because we're all just like gawking, like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. These things have so much weaponry hanging off of them. They have, their armor itself explodes like bombs. It's called explosive reactionary armor. Instead of just being like a chunk of steel to stop a bullet, it explodes in the face of bullets that shoot at it. Like when they shoot a rocket-propelled grenade at the M1 Abrams tank or the Bradley fighting vehicle, it's got armor on the outside that's got bombs in it. So when it hits it, it explodes back in that big round's face. It's like, hey, grenade, guess what? I'm going to blow you up with another grenade just so you'll stop hitting me. Like, it's astonishing things to consider. And I was so enamored with all this stuff. I was just drinking it in like the sweet savor of the gods. I thought it was the best thing I'd ever seen in my life. I wanted to be in that kingdom and that world the rest of my life. I thought it was the greatest place I'd ever been. And you know what I discovered while I was in that world and in that kingdom? Everybody was a liar. And everybody that was in that system was addicted to deception, cheating, murder, slander, drunkenness, debauchery, hatred, violence, death. Like, it was a kingdom from a different God. There was another Elohim who had a total disregard for the things that were truly precious. Because you know what? I would go once a week to chaplain service, the service that was presided over by a chaplain. It's like a multidisciplinary interfaith system. It's basically like a guy who's willing to teach the gospel of any God, kind of, more or less. Like, you're really not allowed to be a super salty preacher in the United States military anymore. Like, if you want to go preach in prisons right now, there's a lot of states that literally make you sign a piece of paper that says, I will not say the words that there is but one way to heaven. Like, that I will not declare that there's just one way to eternal life. Like, you literally are banned from going and preaching and evangelizing in a lot of prisons in the United States and a lot of militaries around the world if you say that there's only one way into heaven. That's just a little bit offensive. This thing's so full of other offensive things. It's unacceptable to teach like this, let alone if you want to tell somebody that they should regard the Shabbat or the feasts, or that they should consider the instructions from the Father as the most precious thing in the earth. And so, you know what? The Father ripped me out of that kingdom in a very violent way. But you know what? He also did that with some of his other children. Shall we read for a second what the young men were doing back in their day, in the days of, David? Joshua, first of all, before I get there, I want to read about Joshua because it's so sweet. Did you guys ever hear about what they did with spies back in the day? You ever think about it? Who were the spies back then? I did a video in my Becoming a Gibborim series called Soul Spies. And Soul Ties? Soul Spies or something like that. You'll find it. Track it down, people. I'll put a picture in here later for everybody else. But Joshua, when they go to invade the promised land, you know what I'm talking about, y'all? They cross the Jericho River? No. They crossed the Jordan River to go over to attack Jericho. But during that time, you know what they did? They sent spies, which is so cool. And who were the spies, you guys? When Jericho was shut in tight, you know what I mean? Joshua decides, you know what? We better go find out some intel so we can raid those guys out. Here's what he said. And Yahusha, son of Nun, secretly sent out 2 young men from Shittim to spy, saying, go see the land and Jericho. And they went and came to the house of a woman, a whore, and her name was Rahab, and they laid down there. But it was reported to the sovereign of Jericho, saying, see, men from the children of Yasharel have come here tonight to search out the land. And the sovereign of Jericho sent to Rahab, saying, bring out the men who have come to you, who have entered your house, for they have come to search out all the land. But the woman had taken the 2 men and hid them. And the men came, she said to them, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were from. And then it came to be as the gate was being shut, and when it was dark, that the men went out. And I do not know where the men went. Pursue them quickly so that you overtake them. But she had brought them up to the roof and hidden them with the stalks of flax. That's where linen comes from. If you want to hide spies, put them in linen. Biblical. Which she laid out on the roof. And the men pursued them by the way to the Jordan, to the fords. And they shut the gate afterwards, as soon as the pursuers had gone out. And before they laid down, this is the spies, the young men, she came up to them on the roof. And she said to the men, I know that Yahuwah has given you the land, and that the fear of you has fallen on us. Sorry, I'm talking in a non-Rahab voice. I'm working on it. And that the fear of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt away because of you. For we have heard how Yahuwah dried up the water of the sea of reeds for you when you came out of Mitzrayim, and what you did to the 2 sovereigns of the Amorites, who are beyond the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you put under the ban. Those were giants, super giants, gigantic giants, who had iron beds, because if they had them made out of wood, they'd break them. These guys weighed like tons, literal tons. Anyways, and when we heard, our hearts melted, and there was no spirit left in anyone because of you. For Yahuah, your Elohim, he is Elohim in the heavens above and on the earth beneath. And now, please swear to me by Yahuah, since I have shown you loving commitment, that you also show loving commitment to my father's house, and shall give me a true token, and shall spare my father and my mother and my brothers and my sisters and all they that have, and shall deliver our lives from death. And the men said to her, our lives for yours. If you do not expose this matter of ours, then it shall be when Yahuah has given us the land that we shall treat you in loving commitment and truth. So she let them down by a rope. I bet that rope was made of flax. Tow linen. It's like the strongest material ever, and it's what they made the ropes out of. Consider it. The scarlet rope that hung from her house, what do you think it was made of? Pause. I was doing some study on dyeing techniques. And this is what led Chelsea in the becoming a Gibborim, or becoming a Linenite series video 1. We talk about Deuteronomy 22:11, where it says, don't mix wool and linen. And it talks about like adding, also for your tzitzits. When you make tzitzits, which are like biblical WWJD bracelets, like they're to remind you of your covenant with Yahuah. Like it says, add a strand of blue to them. It's like the one thing you're supposed to do. It says make, fringes on your garment or tassels on your garment, so that when you look on them, you will not turn from the right hand or to the left, but you'll stay on the narrow way that Yahuah has set for you. It's like a reminder of your covenant. Like when you look down and see these things hanging off of you, like the wings of your garment, this is healing in his wings. All those passages we hear about in scripture, what the woman who was bleeding out for years and years of her life, who could not be cured by the doctors, by the white robe priests of her world at that time, she clutched onto the tzitzits of Yeshua's garment and was healed. Okay? This is all about the color blue. I got lost in the color blue and studying how they dye garments with blue to get purple, to get reds, to get all these different colors. And the best understanding that we can get today is that they would use this murex shell. Sorry, they would use a snail, which is in the murex family. And this snail has an organ inside it. I'll roll in some footage of this for you guys later. That when you squish it or crush it, it will change colors. And it'll go from almost these yellows to greens to blues to violets to purples to indigos. It goes through the rainbow spectrum. And when you make a dye out of that and you soak a garment in it, when you soak a garment in it, you can pull it out. And when you expose it to light, it will like lock that color in. But as you pull it out, or sorry, when you quench it in water, it will lock the garment's dye forever. It'll never fade. But when you pull that thing out and if you expose it to sunlight, it will cause a shade and a hue to come out of that dye that is totally unique. So if you do this dyeing on a sunny day, you get a unique color. If you do it on a cloudy day, if you do it in moonlight, you get all different kind of colors in the spectrum from this. But I was looking into the color red at the same time, and there is a worm. Oh, Cochinilla? Oh, I'm totally gonna forget right now. I wasn't planning on this. I'll roll in just some footage of it. But it is literally a parasite kind of that attaches itself a lot of times to cactus or plants that grow in desert climates. And it grows this like white fluffy cocoon kind of thing on it. And when you squish it, it will turn this red pigment color, like a red dye. And so people will take those things and scrape them off and dry them out. And then when they're ready to make dye, they grind it out, right? And then they can put that dye into some water. And when they will put the garment in there, if they add different materials to it, like volcanic ash or baking soda, if you add different materials to it, you can get different dye colors to come out of that, to where you can go from greens and blues all the way up to reds and purples, all from just adding different additives to it. So I found a clip of a woman who is doing this, a natural dyer from Oaxaca, a place I spent time in Mexico. It's southern Mexico, but she's a natural dyer, and she goes through this process, and you can see it, and it's just stunning, absolutely stunning to see how garments were dyed.
Little quantity, but I have reservas. Okay.
Sí.
Okay, look at this. Is a Cochinilla Parasite. This is a dry Cochinilla. Check it now. Many people think this is an insect. Yes, but this is a dry insect.
Right.
I'm shown now. Sorry.
Oh.
Cochinilla alive. I have this cactus, but in Oaxaca, for one village, the name is San Bartolo, cultivate in the village cultivate and sell the cochinilla. And checking now, this is a live cochinilla. Look at little white point is a cocoon.
The bug.
Okay, each people have a different pH. Save me your hands. Okay, your other finger, squeeze it and see now your pH. Each people have a different pH, maybe alkaline.
Here, Alexa.
Okay, push it.
You do your
Squeeze it.
Yes.
Pop
Squeeze
it.
it. Yeah.
And move it. That's okay. Okay, you.
Okay.
Okay,
Oh, you
look
can
at this
do-
is your
I'll hold
pH.
it. I'll hold it. I'll put it in my lap.
Oh, it's okay.
I want to see.
Okay.
You'll see what color.
Yeah.
Look at your color.
Okay.
Ooh.
No, a little bit more. Play now to change
Okay.
the pH and see now the color from the acid.
Oh, then we're really good at alkaline.
Okay.
I've got cleanings.
Okay.
That's funny.
That's amazing. That's cool.
This is a very natural and organic. I use my finger to spinning and make the yarn like this, no? And in this moment, I'm use a little water to change the pH.
Right.
Checking now. I'm use a little cochinilla. Look at it. Okay, and use a little wool. This is in a basic color. Look at it. But
Pretty.
I use a little baking soda and sea salt. Is this?
Wow. There you go.
Look at.
Wow.
This is acid. Look at this color is acid. Mixing baking soda and sea salt.
Right.
And I'm using some water and checking now. I'm using other bowl. And I'm using now a Hamex volcanic stone. This is. And rock limestone and alum.
Hello.
Alum and rock limestone. I'm moving now.
Oh, totally different.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
It's like magic.
This is alkaline. And this is acid.
That's amazing.
But repeat the design each try.
But in order to get that scarlet color, like we see here, sorry, I should probably continue on so you guys can, I jumped ahead a little bit in my head about the garment threads and strands of flax that she was dyeing. But traditionally, tzitzits were made from either wool or linen, okay? Linen thread, because they're very strong. Well, linen's far stronger than wool. And so if you wanted to make a rope, you generally would not make your rope out of wool, right? So the rope that they're being lowered down on, I really believe is flax, because it's clear that Rahab is somebody who has flax drying on her roof, which is how you make linen. So it's very likely Rahab also made linen garments. Shocker, because she was a righteous Proverbs 31 woman. She got to be a seed bearer of Yeshua. She literally from her womb gave birth to the line of kings, to the King of Kings line of kings. Like, this is like David's ancestors, King David. And then Yeshua's ancestors comes from this woman. So you better believe she was a Proverbs 31 woman. Do you know what I'm saying? Who made linen garments for her family. Sorry, I got distracted on that. But the dyeing process is tremendous. And this is literally... So she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was on the city wall, and she dwelt on the wall. And she said to the young men, "Go up to the mountains, lest the pursuers come upon you. And you shall hide there 3 days, until the pursuers have returned, and afterwards go on your way." And the men said to her, "We are released from this oath of yours which you have made us swear, unless when we come into the land, you bind this line of scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down, and unless you bring your fathers and your mother and your brothers and all your father's household to your own home. And it shall be that anyone who goes outside the doors of your house and into the street, his blood is on his own head, and we are innocent. And anyone who is with you in the house, his blood is on our head, if a hand is laid on him. And if you expose this matter of ours, then we shall be released from our oath, your oath, which you made us swear. And she said, let it be according to your words. And she sent them away, and they went. And she bound the scarlet cord in the window. So they left and came to the mountain and stayed there 3 days until the pursuers returned. And the pursuers sought them in all the way, but did not find them. Then the 2 men returned and came down from the mountain and passed over. And they came to Yahusha, the son of Nun, and related to him all that had befallen. And they said to Yahusha, truly Yahuwah has given all the land into our hands also, and the inhabitants of the land have melted away because of us. By the way, this is the scriptures translation to those of you who are curious. ISR. Okay, so the Scarlet Thread. Who had the Scarlet Thread, right? The Israelites. Where did the Israelites get it? From people who made this stuff. From women who would traditionally make these things. And they were the dyers and the people who would make threads, rope, garments. Why did the spies have scarlet thread with them and on their person? Why did they have these things with them? Because it was part of their livelihood. It was something that they regarded as precious and valuable. So precious, in fact, that when you're carrying in your pack, when you're a scout, you can only carry a very small bundle of things. Ideally, you don't want to be like, they're spies, right? Spies generally don't want to be caught carrying things that give them away as spies. So they're carrying around a bundle of stuff that wouldn't make them think that they're Israelites. But obviously, these young men were not the best spies, right? They got routed out pretty much immediately, which is not so good tradecraft, okay? They didn't succeed in doing their spycraft very well. But Yahuwah was merciful with them and entrusted them into the hands of a woman who would deliver them. And you know what? There's a lot of Gibborim women out there. Gibborim, mighty ones. There's mighty women of valor out there who've been hiding and harboring the right things in their hearts and are preparing themselves for a day of battle. And you know what? The day of battle, it's here, y'all. It's here. It's like upon you every single day of your life, because there's this dragon out there who does go about seeking whom he may devour, right? He's got a great rage. I was reading to Naomi. I can't get distracted. Oh, wait. I'm going to tell you right now. There's other scriptures that I read from called the Sefer, which has a lot of the texts that were once included in the scriptures, but have in certain translations been disregarded and cast out. Like Martin Luther, when he did the translation for the Bible out of Latin and into German, the common tongue of the people, he threw out the book of Revelation, I believe James and Hebrews. He threw those books out. Like the Bible for a long time, guys, that we know of as the 66 books of canon. It used to have a lot of other books in there for hundreds and thousands of years, in fact. Even the modern King James Bible that, 1611 King James crowd's all about, it used to have, I think, 82 books in it. One of those books that was often included was Baal and the Dragon, or Baal and the Dragon. And it's literally a book about a showdown between Daniel, like the Daniel, and Baal, like the lords of Baal. This is one of the Elohim of the time of Babel. And he basically has a showdown to prove that their Elohim, this idol that they'd set up, was not really an Elohim, that Yahuwah alone was a living Elohim. And he got that thing torn down because he proved that the priests themselves were liars, keepers of falsehoods and false oaths. And so he got that thing torn down. Well, then there was this dragon that lived there. And you can actually see this dragon, you guys. This is like history, remember. The Bible's history. You can see this dragon with your face. It's on the gates of Ishtar, in which, of course, the Germans took over and captured and built the throne of Zeus. I have a video in my series called The Thrones of Battling Balaam and the Thrones of Zeus, where you can see more of this dragon included in it. But they literally had a real dragon there, you guys, a fire-breathing dragon. And he said, well, that's obviously a living Elohim. The king was like, okay, the idol, granted, it didn't eat food. Shocker. But you know what? Our dragon eats food. So go, what are you going to do about that dragon? And he said, you know what? I'll deal with that dragon. So Daniel personally fights a dragon. Did you know that? And you know what he didn't use to fight that dragon? Hold on. Where'd my rounds of ammunition go? You know what he didn't use? A 300 blackout, guys. I have a challenge for each and every one of you guys that's all about your bullets, okay? I know some of you guys regard your bullets as something super precious and so valuable that you would literally sacrifice your time, your energy, your livelihood, your devotion to go and find ways to get more of them, right? Or just to have some, or to use them, right? I did a video called Sell Your Cloak and Buy a Sword. I challenge you to watch that all the way through and consider what I have to say in there. Because if you can't carry this word in your heart, You can't generally carry all the bullets that you've bought. I guarantee it. A lot of you guys think you need 1,000 rounds of ammunition to be well stocked and ready for it. But then you never train with it or use it or anything like that. So it just sits there like in the armory, right? Unused, locked up, never able to come out and be brought to the day of battle. But if you think you're going to fight dragons with a bullet, let me teach you something. This is how you fight the dragon. You know how I know that? Because it says how to fight the dragon in here. Let me just go to this version of the scriptures and tell you how to fight the dragon. The Bible's literally got a textbook for it. And I challenge you young men out there who are full of piss and vinegar and want to go fight, you young women out there who want to be valiant and mighty, you men, you courageous men who want to get out there and fight and be brave and bold and courageous, memorize a scripture for every bullet you own. I challenge you to do that. If you can memorize one scripture for every bullet you own, you'll be far more ready to engage in the day of battle when it's come upon you. And you'll be ready with the sword of your mouth to cut down your enemies, because this is the real weapon of warfare. Right here, the tongue. Every man has trained and tamed every single beast, it says in James. Every beast of the field has been trained. Every single one of them has been domesticated. People are like, the crocodile. Some guy out there, according to the scriptures, domesticated crocodiles. Come on. Don't you want that job? I would love to wrangle a crocodile. I had a Nature Nate video where I looked an alligator in the eye. I think it was called See a Nader Alligator. I wanted to look an alligator in the eye. I would like to wrestle one. By that, I mean I'd like to ride one like a horse chariot in the swamps of Georgia and Atlanta, because that place is swampy. Wouldn't you like to ride a crocodile? I'm not talking alligators, guys. Crocodiles. These things like eat human beings by the bushel in places all over the world. Alligators are very tame compared to that. That's why I swam up to its face. But it says every beast of the sea and of the air, every animal's been tamed by man, but no man can tame the tongue. See, it's like this restless evil full of deadly poison. It's like with one little spark, you can set an entire forest ablaze. One spark, you can you could burn 100,000 acres with one spark of your tongue. That's so much more firepower, guys, than a rocket launcher. Do you know what I'm saying? The Germans lost thousands of tanks that day in the Battle of the Kursk. And you know what they didn't lose that day? Their desire to keep on fighting. That's really a challenge when you're the guys who want to not die, or you're the guys that really want to win. You know what I mean? Because you know what? They were filled with courage. They were filled with bravery. They had conviction. And you know where that conviction came? From the mouth of a very talented speaker. Somebody who gave good words of courage to make people valiant, to make people brave and willing to die for what they believed in, and willing to fight for what they believed in, and willing to lay down everything they had for what they believed in. That's what this will do to you. If you regard the scriptures as something holy, as something precious, as something desirable, more precious than anything you could ever find, better than gemstones, okay? Better than gemstones. If you would regard it as better than bullets, knives, weapons of warfare, armor, as tactics, if you would regard it, you would learn how to defeat the dragon. Ready? This is how you fight the dragon. Daniel, when he went to fight the dragon in Baal in the dragon story, it says he made food. Yeah. He said, I'm not going to fight this dragon with a sword. He literally told the king, I'm not even going to fight him. I'm not even going to bring a sword to fight that dragon. You know what I'm going to bring? My noodle. My brain. He's going to bring wisdom and the spirit of the living Elohim, which if you need to know how to fight an enemy, if you regard this word, if you literally memorize 1,000 verses, do you know how much wisdom and armory, or how many tools and weapons of warfare you just stored in your armory? Think about it. Consider that, you guys. Daniel fights him with not even a staff, right? You ready for this? He fights him with pitch, fat, and hair. That's how he killed the dragon. He fed it snack. He baited the dragon. He baited him. Just like you would bait a rat. And so what happened is the dragon ate those things, and when it went to breathe fire, which they tend to do, there's fiery flying serpents. Read the book of Isaiah. They're all over there. They're fiery flying serpents. They're called nachash a lot of times. These things breathe fire. And when it went to breathe fire, you know what happened? It combusted. It blew himself out from the inside out. Okay? Revelation 12:11 also tells you how to defeat the dragon. You ready for this? And they overcame him. Who's him? Okay, verse 9 says, and the great dragon was thrown out, that serpent of old called the devil and Satan, who leads the world astray. He was thrown to the earth, and his messengers were thrown out with him. And they overcame him, the dragon, because of the blood of the Lamb, the words of their testimony, and they did not love their lives even when faced with death. That is how you defeat the dragon. The words of testimony. This is his testimony. These are the literal living instructions. It's his words. Like, what did he breathe into Adam in the garden? He breathed these words into Adam. He breathed these words into man to make him from a creature of clay and dust to a creature that lived and had authority on the earth to go forth and do mighty things. That is what Linenites are all about. People that suddenly look at the things that the rest of the world has disregarded because they've been led astray by the dragon. Okay? They've been led to walk in a way that would turn them to the right or to the left. It would keep them on this goat-like trail going randomly, haphazardly through the wilderness. And instead of walking on the narrow path that was set before them, Yahuwah and those who regard his ways walk on narrow path. It's an unpopular path because it's kadosh. It's set apart for a different kingdom. It doesn't make sense to the people of this world. It doesn't matter to the people of this world. It is disregarded. But when you suddenly think and consider these words and think like he does, that these are valuable things that you want to treasure up in your heart, you become mighty. Rahab became one of one in that city who was not set apart to destruction. Harem. She was the one who was not put under the ban to be killed, slaughtered, set apart for destruction. She was marked with Yahuwah's name upon her. She was delivered with the thread of life. That thread of Yeshua's bloodline would come through her. That womb that she bore out of her came the life of deliverance, came Yeshua, salvation. Yahusha, Yah is our salvation. It came from that woman regarding Yahuwah Elohim as a precious and mighty king, as a mighty one, not the mighty ones of the nation, the other Elohim. She did not care for that. And you know what? If you would regard these things, you can cast off those former lusts of your youth. You can cast off these things that are not going to save you. And you can instead find that which will save you. This is the living word made flesh, Yeshua in the flesh. And if you will treasure it, if you will regard it, you will be so mighty that you will never need to pick up the sword of the flesh in order to battle the kings of the earth. You will pick up the sword from your mouth, and everything you've ever need will come forth to you in that moment of your need. He will give it to you as you have need. I pray each and every one of you would be emboldened and filled with courage to go forth and do mighty acts on this earth, and to be a set-apart, strange, peculiar people who regard the words of this testimony and treasure up the flax, y'all, because it is a mighty garment. And don't forget, it's your armor, just like this is. I love you. I pray each of you would find a new way to be courageous today, and to love the people that are around you, and to bless your enemies and not seek their destruction, but to seek their deliverance, because you, like them, have all been perishing. I'll talk to you all soon.